Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Sarah Huffman, and I am the Art Rental and Sales Associate at the Art Gallery of Alberta. We welcome you to our Meet the Artisan series, a part of AGA Live. Here at the gallery, we embrace the teachings of Tatewa, a Cree phrase meaning welcome, there is room. In our house, even the virtual one, everyone is welcome. I'm delighted to be your host for this hour. Joining me today is artisan Juliana Reece of Infused Glassworks. Before we dive into the subject, I'd like to highlight that this is an interactive event and we'd like to hear from you. You are welcome to use the chat window on the side screen to share your comments as we discuss with Juliana. If a question gets unnoticed or unanswered at the time, please know that we will review all unanswered questions before we wrap up today's event. So Juliana is inspired by nature and the physics of being. This passion has given birth to collections like Tree Lover at Heart series and The Colors of Your Soul. Her work is often flavored with hints of her earlier career as a geological technician, featuring fossilized detail and patterns akin to stratigraphic cross-sections. Her love of translucent color and texture, combined with the technical aspects behind each firing, makes glass fusion the perfect medium for her mad, happy scientist at heart. She started Infused Glassworks in 2010 to dedicate herself to the study and experimentation of kiln-formed glass. Her work at Radium Hot Springs received the People's Choice Awards with Parks Canada. It has also been featured in prestigious events such as Ottawa's Snowflake Charity Ball, Art Takes Times Square, New York, USA, and has been published in Best of Worldwide Glass, as well as the Spectrum Glass Company's National Glass publication. She currently creates and teaches from her home studio in Calgary. Please take this time with me to give a warm welcome to our September artisan, Juliana Reece. Hello! Welcome! Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Juliana. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful that I get this opportunity as well, too. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, AGA. I tell you now because I go off on a tangent often and I don't want to forget to thank you later. So thank you. And thank you, everybody who is taking the time to listen to this today, too. And for all those who like to appreciate my art. Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're so excited to learn more about this process. I know there's so much with glass as a medium. I'm really intrigued to know what goes behind the process, the artistic endeavors, and the safety. How do you keep safe in a studio with glass? And yeah. Definitely probably have to wear goggles, I'm assuming.
These are actually safety glasses. I have them on because I will snap a piece of glass for you in a little while.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So let's maybe start off with talking about your artistic process and maybe what are some things that have inspired you to create pieces and how do you get started?
Okay, so my artistic process, I guess the inspiration strikes before I even get into the studio. I'm known to go for a bike ride and I'm looking at nature because I'm a tree lover-aholic and just love nature and colors. And my mind is looking at things going, because each of the colors of glass that I buy have a code number for them. And I'm riding my bike thinking, that's 533 blue, that's this green, that's that. And I'm thinking, and then my wheels start, I take that piece of nature and turn it into glass because there's it's like doing a 3D Sudoku puzzle or something when I'm building the pictures. Because to give it depth, I have to figure out what can go on the backside, what will go on the top, because the glass is really slippery and things will go flying all over the place and it won't work. It'll just be a mess if I can't figure out the puzzle process of how to layer it to fire the piece. So those things all start happening before I even get in the studio. And then when I'm in the studio, I have a sample. Every single thing that I make starts off with a sheet of glass, like you can see here. Mm-hmm. The sheets I order are 2 feet by 2 feet, and I order like a couple $1,000s at a time, and they ship them in a big crate here to the studio. So if I want a little teeny piece of red to do Indian paintbrush, I got to take a big sheet like this and cut a little piece. So that's part of the process. Um, that's definitely where it all starts. Then some of the things I make have it's like you have to make all your components before you can even begin to do the assembly. So I know you guys have a piece at the gallery there that's called larch trees, and there's these little teeny tiny nuggets. They're representational of the pine cones. I have to make those before I can even start the assembly. And how you make them is you take that big 2-foot sheet of glass and you cut it into smaller than a quarter of an inch square, and then you put it in the kiln. I'm just going to show you guys close up like that if you can see.
Oh, wow.
So you heat the kiln to a full fuse and it takes about 24 hours. It melts. It makes it like a little puddle of honey on the kiln shelf, and that square contracts back and makes these nuggets. So I can't buy nuggets anywhere. So anytime you see a nugget in something, I have to make it first. So,
right. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into each individual piece.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I can actually show you also some of the assembly. Everything I build starts off on one plane of clear glass, typically. It doesn't have to be clear, but I tend to build mostly on clear because I like translucent. And I will put all these pieces of glass after they're cleaned, if I can see that, you can see it there. Bear with me. Can you see that better?
Yes.
That I layer the entire sheet of clear glass with all of the components, and then I have to glue it down. Later on in the slideshow, I have some pictures that show each of the steps, so maybe I'll zip past that part now. When we get to the slideshow, I can kind of talk you through it when you have a visual to look at.
Yeah.
But I can show you now, actually, if you want. So you build the whole thing, it's glued and it's fritted, and you're going to say, what's frit? Frit is smashed up particles of glass. So it comes in, I don't know if it's going to work. I tried to get a color that might be visual. Like this looks like sea salt, but I can buy the frit. And you can get it coarse like sea salt, or you can get it fine like, that's like, that's dark colors, it's hard to tell. But it's like sugar, or it can be like icing sugar. And so I use all that, and it's like painting with sand. I put little teeny droplets of all the colors of sand all over the place, clean it up, and then it goes in the kiln, and it's fired once. I have samples here to show that I could. So it goes in the kiln after I've done all that work, and then the piece will come out flat.
Oh.
So this is a sample. You can see that it's just with a clear piece of glass decorated with everything. It's all flat. That's the first firing. Then if it's going to become a dish versus a picture, because depending on what you're making, there's a million different processes to follow.
Yeah, I bet.
You would put it on, this is a slumping mold. You can kind of see it has a curve. So it goes in the kiln again. It gets fired one more time, but this time not as hot. Like there's different temperatures for different techniques. Not as hot. And then when it comes out, you have this nice, does that show a bit of curve? So I have a better sample.
Well, that one was lovely. So
here's an olive dish.
Oh, that's really neat.
Okay, you can see it's got some shape. And this is the actual mold that it came out of. So it was flat once. It was flat once, and then it was slumped to that shape. I like that, showing you that better than the square one, because it didn't have much shape to see on the camera.
And I do have a quick question for you. After it comes out of the kiln, because are you able to cut it in any way? Because I've seen in like glass blowing that you're able to kind of snip and pull and that kind of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily happen with this form of glasswork, correct?
Correct. I mean, it's technically possible to get a wet tile saw and saw a piece in half. It's not the mainstream way that you create this particular technique that I do. In fact, yeah, when you're doing a private commission for people, I often take pictures of the steps along the way in case you want to tweak something, because you can't tweak it once it's fired. Like a painter can repaint or leave a different color or things up. You can't do that with this. Once it's fired, it's start from scratch again if you need to change anything, typically.
Yeah. Must be stressful work.
Well, I think I'll do it to myself. Some of them, you can keep this very simple and
Mhm.
just put a couple pieces of color and make a nice little plate, but it just isn't my nature apparently to do that. Like,
Right.
I want to add a lot of as much detail as I can get away with.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of detail, let's start on with the presentation because I have some wonderful images that you've sent me, and I would love our audience to get a look. So this one is very interesting. I'm assuming this is the process in which you're making a piece, just more the nuggets on the side, and then you're starting to plan everything out.
Yeah, the piece will just come to life. Like this was the first piece I made. I had an injury a couple of years ago, and this was actually the first piece I could do, and I could stand again in my studio and do glass. So it's like I didn't have to hurry up and create anything in particular for a deadline. I could just play. So I
Right.
just follow your inspiration, and I wanted to play with this, making a lot of reactions. So first step, I played and made all these different nuggets, those little squares that get melted. And
Yeah.
then the second picture there, I started to build them into components, knowing kind of the flow and vibe I wanted the piece to take. But that was just a very preliminary step. So we go to the next slide. That's a close-up of once I had all of those pieces that have curvature were pre-made in a separate firing before they even made it to the master canvas of glass for the
Right.
assembly. And they're all glued down. And then what you see there is it's a soft little edge of black on there. That's powder like icing sugar that was
Okay.
over the entire piece. And then very carefully with the paintbrush, dust it off. So there was just enough to antique it. It helped make all the colors pop.
Right.
But you couldn't see that without a close-up shot there. And you can see that this particular piece has a billion nuggets of all kinds and shapes on it.
Yeah, it does. So first was the laying everything down, gluing it at the proper spot, and then the powder on top.
That's right.
Oh, neat.
And before all of that, all of the components had to be made. All
Right.
the nuggets had to be made and stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this part was the final easy part. This only
Yeah.
took a little bit of time. And there's
And then,
piece.
yeah, it's gorgeous. I love the movement of this piece. It really shows that there's so much versatility with each piece that you've made and you've prepared, and then it just comes into this beautiful final work.
It's one of those samples of sometimes creation and the source and inspiration just comes from you don't know why you're doing it, you're just doing it. And like I didn't have a plan for this, I just started to play and it started to unfold. And when you have a piece like this, it's really fun because for me at the end, the piece names itself to me. So I'm sitting there looking at it and then like boom, it wants to be called. I know that might sound weird to some people, but that's how my artwork gets named sometimes. It wanted to be called Secret Treasures Along the Trail because to me, it's like maybe you found a feather or there's droplets of water sitting on a leaf somewhere and it's all flowing. Like nature is all about flow and all the little teeny different things that are hidden in it that like us, like humans, we all fit in this crazy story called life. And we're all actually flowing along. So for me, that's why the piece is named Treasures Along the Trail. And it's the one of. I have never done another piece in this series.
Oh, I love it. It's so unique. It's so peaceful. And I really feel like it has a true vibe of who you are as an artist and that playfulness that it brings. I know that we've talked about it briefly before of what you kind of want what your audience to feel when they're looking at artwork. And if you want to maybe explain to our audience tonight what you hope that people feel when they see your artwork.
Well, I think a lot of people will say that art is meant to evoke some kind of emotion. And for me, that emotion, it absolutely has to be joy and upliftment. I know that there's shock art out there and there's political statement art out there, and that's not my gig. I just want to make the world a lighter place, even if you don't know that it has lifted your spirit and put a smile on your face when you're looking at it. I know it has. Maybe it's not your favorite art, and you got to be a person who's called to that particular color or design or whatever. But that's the intention behind all of my art, is to share a little bit of that and also to share some of the magic of glass, because glass is one of those subjects or topics or mediums that people say never touch, don't touch. And my favorite thing when I'm doing a live show, because most of my work is very textured and tactile, is when even a big grown-up person who knows better than to touch can't help but to reach out there and touch it, because you can't. It's very tactile and it's like tempting you to touch the untouchable. I love that mischievousness about it. And
Right.
this piece also really calls for the mad scientist in my heart, because when you have a close look at it, there are certain colors of glass if they have copper in them and if they have sulfur in them. And backing up to that, each sheet of glass comes solid. I cannot paint it different colors. So
Right.
it's glazes. It's got different minerals right in the sheet of glass that make it that color. So what I'm getting at with this one is that when copper and silver touch, they have a reaction. And so when you look closely at this piece, there are little spots where the blue will touch the lime and it turns brown. So there's lots of mad science planned into this piece too.
That's so cool. And did you come across that on purpose, or was that kind of a happy accident?
In this particular piece, I did it on purpose. I was really, but I'm going to take some time to play with these reactions, because I really wanted to see how I knew about what some colors did, but I thought I'm going to play with that aspect. So some of the details, it might look like I put dark burgundy frit around the piece, but it's actually not dark burgundy frit. It's clear frit that turned dark burgundy when it touched the other color.
Wow, that is
I had some fun not knowing what it's going to look like till it was fired, but I got to see it before it assembled, because that was done in the component level when I was building each of the feathers and whatever you call them.
Cool. That's awesome. Let's move on to this piece. So again, like you mentioned earlier, those little nuggets you've created individually, and there's so many in this piece. I love the texture that it creates and just the 3D element that it brings out as well. I feel like I can just go ahead and touch the leaves and they're just about to fall off. And
somebody said to me when they first saw this, they said, "Hey, jelly tots really do grow on trees," or whatever, that Skittles really do grow on trees. And that one, the way I built it, they all had to be a million colors and sizes and shapes so it would look more organic. There's actually a tree underneath there, because you don't know where, when you're creating, you don't know exactly where you're going to lay each of those pieces.
Right.
So there's actually like the rib cage, the stems, and everything is actually hiding behind there, so that when it peeks through in spots, there's no, how come there's no branch there section? So lots of layers and details in this one.
That's wonderful. And this one's my favorite. I can't get over how dimensional this one is here.
I know I blow myself away some days, because they just keep getting, when I look back at my early work and now I see these things, it's like, whoa, they're just, like, I started painting part-time, learning how to paint, and I'm really clear that that's making a difference in my glasswork too, because it's got me daring to add depth and texture.
Right.
Like, this shows what this piece looks like kind of at the happy hour, golden hour of day when the sun is shining on it. There's opal glass on the front of it, which means the light doesn't transmit through it, so that you get the really bright red. But if you show this next slide, when it's backlit from behind, it's like, now it makes everything else come alive. It gives the piece depth. It's like now you're looking through at nightfall and you can see the lake in the distance, and there's even ripples in the lake, and that's all due to there's painting on the backside with the high fire glass line. Not paint, the high fire glass line paint. I paint on the pieces and incorporate that into them before it's fired.
Yeah.
To give that extra depth. But this demonstrates one of my favorite things about glass as well, and why I seem to like making these translucent pictures is you can view them from both sides, and this picture here is actually both front views, but they change. People think often that this is two different pieces of artwork, but it's not. It's the same image. It's just different lighting. And it's really fun to play with. If you have a shelf of light and you push it in and out like this, you can see it go from day to light, like 4 o'clock when the sun's bright, and the sun goes down and the moon comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how it shows the versatility of your artwork, and especially the medium of glass, because you can put this anywhere in your home where you have a window, where there's a light, or you could put it on the shelf, wherever it may fit in your home, and it's a completely different look wherever it is.
Depend, and it's also like, you know, when you get up in the morning having your coffee, you look up and it's like it's glowing when the sun's shining through. And then in the evening when the sun's going down, it's still beautiful. It's just completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I think that originally when I started making these two-sided glass framed pieces, in my mind I was thinking about how people often get stuck in a cubicle and they don't even have a little piece of joy at their office.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty harsh. I don't mean it like that. You want to have something to put the smile and lift your spirits in the day, to have a little small piece of desk art was
Yeah.
what I originally intended it for. And then I thought, you know, and then you get the boss sitting at the desk and they've got the beautiful art that they can see, but the poor guy who comes and sits on the other side of the desk doesn't get to enjoy it.
Right.
By making it two-sided, I thought this is so awesome about glass, because now both parties can enjoy it at the same time.
Exactly. I love that. All right. And then this one here, I love how they're all just a tad different as well. So is this a series that you created?
Well, this is part of the Tree Lover Heart series.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's like people love birch trees, especially red ones, and so do I, and I love making them. So each one is always a little bit different. But when I mix up the paint that I need to use, it's a high fire. I could show you later. I don't think it's the biggest deal. It's a little tube of paint, and it has a little teeny silver enamel tip, and I have to squeeze it out like writing "Happy Birthday" on a cake.
Right.
That's how those trees are painted on the glass.
Wow.
And then to get the detailing into the trunks, I literally have high-tech tools like a stick pin that I use to spiral it around, so you have to work with it while it's wet. So the reason I do a couple at a time is because it's time-wise, it takes a lot of time to mix up the paint, and then once you're going, you might as well make a couple. So, and I like to just sit down and make a couple at a time. And then the ones on the top were different samples used for some summer birches that I did. But before I even start painting those, I actually have to meticulously fit in size and cut the mountains, all the glass from the backside.
Right.
Because if it doesn't line up straight, then it doesn't make a nice square formed picture. So those get glued done first, and then, cut, ground, and glued. Paint the top on. And when that paint dries, I need to actually go back in with a carving tool. Because if you can see on here, like especially the top middle one, some of the bottoms of the tree are sloppy and blubby and stuff. So when that paint dries, I go in and clean the whole thing up, and then it's finally ready for the stage called scripting.
Cool. That's wonderful. And then the kiln.
That's where some real magic happens. So some people want to know, where's your kiln? Well, it's definitely not in my house. It's in my garage. My studio is in my home. I can say that. I'm in my basement home studio talking to you right now.
Right.
And I just take it out to the garage, and that's where the magic happens. So
Awesome.
I think the kiln shelf is like almost 30 inches by 30 inches. So in the world of kilns, it's big. I'm happy.
Yeah. Nice.
That's a sample of one of the finished birch trees that
Yeah.
printed and framed and fired.
I'm just going to pop back to the image when it was in the process, just so folks can see that again. So afterwards, did you add the yellow on top, and then you put that?
Yeah, that's the part where I'm like painting with sand, or with the
Right. Okay.
And yeah, I just have a little teeny, I call it a scoop shovel. It's kind of like a square spoon. Yeah. And you literally are tapping, you're tapping it and letting it fall and painting it. And it gets all over the place. And then you have to use a paintbrush and dust it off. Like if you look at the final picture, there's no frit on top of the white bark of the trees. And that's I have to go in and dust it all off, carefully pushing each particle to get the effects. It's
very precise. Yeah.
It gets intense, so I can't always do it for 8 hours a day. Like sometimes it's kind of fun to go sit up in my kitchen and do the painting part, and then when I'm down in the studio here doing the grit work, you only do a couple at a time, and then you just have to stop because it gets too intense sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine it's probably quite difficult on your body as well, because you're probably leaning and moving your arms around and straining your neck.
Lean over with the paintbrush like this, and dust without touching anything else. So yes, you're right. It is.
Awesome.
And this is a good example, or a bunch of slides here where it shows how it started from inspiration and it will lead us through with a slideshow to the finished piece. So always when I was a little girl, I used to always like going out to Radium and driving on that highway. You can see this wicked, wonderful shade of turquoise blue mountain water. It's Marble Canyon, so that's where the inspiration shots where I took the summer.
Yeah.
So there's always more to it because I'm out there going, I got to get an angle where I can actually know I can cut the glass, because glass doesn't like to be cut in a square or sharp 90-degree angle. It has to have curves and fit. So got an angle. It's like, yeah, I got an angle. It works. So there's the composite. And then it's painted on the back side. And after it's painted, I also carve it.
Yeah.
So then next slide. After that, I glue it onto the master clear piece of glass, and then more stuff on the front. So I painted trees on the front, and then the rocks are painted, and then they're carved and scratched. And then when that's all cleaned up, then I added the Indian paint brushes, so that now I can finally get to the fritting part. And here you can't even see the trees behind the green right now. So it's crazy on your eyes to do sometimes too. And I work sometimes on a light table so that I can actually see the result.
Right.
And if you want to lead me to next, there's a close-up of the final piece. And I have it here. I don't know if it's going to look any different, but I'll try and zoom it in for you to have a look.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I
love the texture in the water and the color in the water. You just totally nailed it. That's exactly what that river looks like.
I know, when I saw that water, it's like, oh my God, I know I've got that color of glass. This is happening. So this is the first in the marble. I'm sure I'll make a couple more Marble Canyon scenes because it's one of my favorite stops. And
wonderful.
As far as I'm concerned, I almost can't have a nature image without flowers. So that's why, and near in Marble Canyon, there are Indian paintbrushes or paintbrushes, fireweed and stuff. So I did my own artistic license of combining them together.
Yeah, I love it. And those, the flowers on the bottom, so to create those nuggets, do you have to make more of like a cylinder almost with the glass? Like you have to, instead of using little squares to make the nuggets, is it just a longer?
Well, sometimes I cut them. So I didn't show you what my master tools are, but I will show you those.
Yeah.
This, here, I get it up there. That's my cutting tool. On the tip here, there's a tiny little wheel, diamond point, and I score the glass, which means, I don't know if it's going to work. I try to color that there. You can see that line on the glass?
Yep.
You have to score it, and then you snap it. So I'll see if I can do this because I've made one sample for you.
Oh, okay.
When you score it, you can snap it. But it doesn't like to go in a circle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you guys this. There's probably about 7 little, no, I can't see. There you go. Can you see it?
Oh, yep.
Okay, whatever. So there's a whole bunch of little shards, and that's from cutting one circle. That's it. You know the moon or the sun?
Oh, right.
It's a little circle like this that had to be snapped. So you see that snap? Well, you can snap it with your hands, or I have 2 different plier tools that you can also get a hold of the glass like this and snap it 7 or 8 times just to get a circle, and then that has to be ground so that I have it. And I don't know if that works. See that? Yep. Every circle doesn't turn out perfect.
Circles are hard. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, there's a side tangent on cutting glass and my tools and circle cutting.
That's awesome.
What was your other question? You're going off on a tangent.
No worries. Don't worry at all. Speaking of cutting glass, we kind of joked about it earlier about your safety goggles. But have you ever, like, obviously glass can cause damage and cause harm. So how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with safety in your studio?
It's amazing how once you get going in this, you don't think about it too much. It's like when I teach classes, when people come, I say, yeah, if you've never done this before, it won't be long. You'll be sticking your hand there, digging around, looking for that perfect shape, and you get pretty comfortable with it. You know, if you get a sliver in your hand, just swish it around in the water and pull it away like this. And there's lots of Band-Aids, and any good day down here in major production, I've got them all over my hand.
Right.
And it's usually just a little poke. You know, you practice safety. You wear gloves when you're dealing with the big sheets, but you don't wear gloves doing the little work because it sticks and snags. So I have to show you my favorite safety thing, but COVID, for all of you people complaining about wearing masks for COVID, get over it. This is a respirator, and you have to wear that when you're working with the powders and when you're keeping a kiln shelf. Like I put it in the kiln, but backing up there, you can't just stick it in the kiln. You have to paint the shelf with a special kiln wash. Glass doesn't stick to it. So every time you deal with that, because it's silica dust and powder, you always want to be wearing a respirator and dispose of things safely, and don't do it in your house. Like, I do scraping out in the garage. And then there's foot fans and things you can use to suck the air out. But it didn't have powder in your space as well. And I don't use a lot of powder. When I do, I keep it to a minimum because I really don't like wearing that thing either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine that that's not I can imagine that it's almost an expensive product that you have to use.
The powder or the
powder.
Yeah, that's a good question. All of this glass is expensive.
Yeah.
When you look at it and you see those sheets, it looks like the same stuff that people use for stained glass, but it's not.
Okay.
In fact, right now there is only one source in the world that we know of that supplies the glass that I use, which is called, maybe now it's two. There's a couple fringe companies that are starting to make it, but it's called System 96 glass, which means it cools and expands. Its coefficient is 96. It cools and expands at the rate of 96. There's another company that has a different coefficient, but you can't mix the two together because if the red cools and expands at a different rate than the blue, and they're right beside each other on a plate, they will crack in half. So the coefficient has to be the same for all the colors. So there's just one company right now, and they've shipped it. They're down to Mexico. So it was in the United States. This stuff was actually invented in the late 70s in the Pacific Northwest by a couple of different companies, Bullseye and Spectrum and Ouroboros. All the guys who started those companies came up with this. It wasn't even a thing. You couldn't even do fusing prior to that because there was no supply.
Right.
They made it so you could buy sheets of this and build things that when you melted them together, they wouldn't crack in half.
Right.
So when I order it, I have to order a lot because it comes I don't get it right from Mexico. They ship it to a warehouse in the States and I order it from there because I don't even know where you can buy it locally very much by the sheet.
Right. And you mentioned that it comes in a crate, because I imagine they have to be quite careful when they're shipping the glass.
I'm gonna pick this thing up and give you guys a view if I can. I don't know. See if we can do it.
Absolutely.
So this is I thought it'd be more fun to show you my little crazy corner of the world where I do all of the work. So that's my cutting table. There's a grid underneath it.
Cool.
Is it working?
Yeah.
See that? That's the crate.
Okay. I see.
Sorry. I can't get down and stick my face in the camera to see what you're looking at. But, they're these big, and the guys can't lift them off the truck. It has to come with one of those jack dollies or dolly jacks, drop tailgates, and I bought a big board so they could ramp it into my garage, and then I carry every sheet 2 at a time into the studio in the house.
Wow, that's awesome.
You have to do it because I need the stuff.
All right, and I want to show this other process one that we have here because you have a little wonderful animal in it.
So I really like making winterscapes. So that's kind of what started this. A couple of years ago, I made a couple of winterscapes and had a bush or two, and one had a little nutshut. And then I'm like, I want to do it with something else, but I'm not. It's really hard to cut that tiny detail into that. That little guy is a polar bear, and he's probably the size of your thumbnail. And it's not technically possible to make those cuts. And so for years, it didn't go on my radar. But I do teach Christmas ornaments classes and make Christmas ornaments, and have to drill holes in those ornaments. And so one day, I saw this artwork of someone had done an artwork of a bear, and it was all abstract and crazy. And I looked at it, and I had this big brainstorm. Like, oh my God, you should have the little bear below it, and then do the big bear, the Big Dipper in the sky.
Yeah.
I have a piece that's called, anyways, that got me going, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do polar bears. So I had to figure out how to do polar bears.
Right.
Well, you can see this. Can you see
Oh
that?
my gosh, it's so tiny.
Yeah. So he's made by cutting the piece of glass as
Yeah.
small as I can like that. And then I actually use a drill underwater where you can't see. And
Right.
I'm going to figure it out and get those little dips to make his legs and definition on him. And then you can't zoom in there, but if anyone gets a chance to see the actual piece in the gallery, because you have it there, he's painted.
Yeah.
So you see little streaks of white fur in his fur. And to get the detail of the eye and the ear, I'm like, well, oh no, I never thought this through. It's going to be a big ball, but I never have done it.
Right.
Use a pin. I actually use a pin and
Yeah.
dip a tiny little pin into the paint and carefully put it on there so
Yeah.
that because it needs to be proper portions
Right.
ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
this is the first step to make them, and so I have a piece called "You're Never Really Alone." That's the little bear with the big bear, the Big Dipper, and was the first one. But then I started thinking, oh, I love these polar bears. I'm going to make some more. So I did a couple that there's like Midnight Rendezvous and that kind of thing, couple pieces. But this guy that you have here, it's like, well, I also color, and there's not a lot of color at night in the art. So this is the Summer Tundra series. So we go to the next. And so that one, this one's got more to it because it's got all the glass on the back and then the polar bear on the front. And this one also has glass on the front. So it's kind of like the two pictures and
yeah.
layering together. So this is just the rough cuts you can see. And then all those pieces are actually cut and ground and cleaned and glued on. And then next one, then it's printed. So this picture here, not fired, but you can see that it's all kind of little bits of sand and then other stuff, which I'm going to show. Can you see these things? They're getting all over my computer.
Oh, those are very interesting.
You make these by making a pot melt where there's a hole in the bottom of the kiln, and you put a bunch of different colored glass in the pot that's got a hole in the bottom of it.
Yeah.
That goes through the kiln, and then you're standing underneath the kiln hitting these glass spaghetti around to get all these wild and crazy noodles. And then I have a container full of these wild and crazy stringer noodles, like colored spaghetti, and I snap them so I can get the curvature I want to make the branches and the bushes there.
Wow.
That's the other component thing where you got to make stuff before you get to assemble. And all the things layered there. And then this one, you can see the little, I Googled and researched what kind of flowers they have in the Arctic, and there's some kind of little blue ones, which I forget the names of now, but it's like, yay, I can put some color in there. So this is the summer series, and there's the finished piece.
Wow. It's so amazing to think of how many steps go into this process and how unpredictable it must be. And especially when you're making your little noodles, you don't know exactly how they're going to turn out. And you just kind of got to go with it.
It's like it's one of those, you got to be in your bonnet and you just have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now this one I know has a good story behind it. So for the audience, I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite mistake you've ever made?
You're looking at my favorite, that's a close-up of my favorite mistake. This piece here, yeah, you'll see it in the picture better, but I still have it. I'll have it forever as a reminder that sometimes the most perfect intentions, they all go south, and it's not the end of the day. It actually leads you on a journey to an even better place. So the name for this first piece, and all of them, are called Lemony Snippet. And what happened was, I used to not have the kiln in my house, and I was on a cinnamon kick. So I made this big bowl that was supposed to look like just one giant lemon when you looked into it.
Right.
And I was getting things fired at another studio that was just a teaching studio, and they really didn't know the art of firing something 4 inches deep. You have to go really slow, maybe multiple firings to get something that deep to slump properly in shape. So the thing cracked in half in the kiln. So I have this lemon bowl. Now what am I going to do? You can't fix it. And then I was carrying another tray of little teeny lemons that were like sliced lemons on ice that I was making. for someone, and it and because I didn't have my own films, I was such a mad I had to do this that I would rent films and carry cookie sheets with balls of paper round pieces and drive across town to get them fired somewhere else. Well, one of those fell and hit the ground on the car. So then I kind of discouraged and like put them away, whatever, for a while. And then I got this idea because another glass artist, I joined a little glass guild here once years ago, and I didn't know anything when I was starting out. And they said, well, bring some of your samples, come visit us and bring your samples. We'll have coffee, donuts, and glass artists talk about whatever together, encourage each other and help each other. So I showed her my stuff, and I guess I had some pretty awesome stuff because this lady taught a class later, and she pulls out a hammer and says to the class, okay, everybody, this is the most important tool a glass artist will ever have. Except for you, Juliana. You don't even And so when this happened to me, I'm like, and she was saying it fun and friendly. Like I said, hey, guess what, Sue? I finally used my hammer. And I smashed these pieces up and made these abstract compositions like this because you can actually see some sections are like bigger and then there's little things. But I have a close-up of this because I also tried making my own frit back then using a coffee grinder where you put the glass in and well, it worked, but you actually need to use a serious hardcore magnet to get the little metal flakes out because you're wrecking the coffee grinder. And if you close, you can see these little black dots. So that's like my humble reminder that there's little pieces of coffee grinder in this bowl. And that's where the name, because that crazy movie Lemony Snicket's was out. And I thought, well, this is such a perfect name. This is my series of my unfortunate events. It's going to be Lemony Snippets. So this is the
I love it.
And then if you go to the next slide, that's the actual bowl. So it's not even slumped straight. The edges are crooked. It's like, what was I thinking? That I still have people saying, you have to will me that bowl. And I'm like, yeah, that's not very nice, but okay, you know. I mean, let's not talk about me willing anything. Anyway, so if you go to the next slide, this gave birth to done, in my opinion, this is how they should be done.
Yeah.
Snippets. And so the plot thickens, you know, you think that's it. It's maxed out. We've got lemony snippets, it's awesome. But then I've been to Mexico a zillion times and can get in a lot of trouble and save myself speaking Spanish. So I know that Spanish people don't have lemons. Or Mexico doesn't have lemons. They have only limon, and it's a lime. So that's the green one on the left here. It's called limon snippet. And that's the final piece in the series. And
that's wonderful.
That's what's interesting enough to do grapefruits, and the orange glass is too interesting to do orange, and there's no such thing as orangey snippets. So that's it for the series, as far as I know.
That's so fun. There's so much character to these pieces, and they feel very retro, but like they're coming back.
Well, these ones are they're tactile too. You can touch them. Like no kidding. I mean, that the texture on the backside, whereas the first one was very smooth.
Right.
And when I first did this, I actually did some close-up photographs of my process, and they looked so cool. We turned them into giclée prints, where I did some extra detailing on it. People hung them in their kitchen.
That's wonderful. That's such a great idea. I love how this whole process, there's so many different components to it, and that they can each lead to so many different projects and so many different series.
I know.
Yeah, wonderful.
I mean, I don't know all of that when it starts. You just follow that bee in your bonnet and do it. And then, get another idea off of it. The glass itself is inspiration often. It's like, look at this green color. Like, I didn't think about, oh yeah, I went to Mexico and that's what the lines are. I just thought, so I'm looking at the green glass in the studio going, I'm getting tired of making yellow ones today. What other could I do? And it's like, hey, and that's, the green glass was just like a perfect balance of the colors. And then it turned out, hey, that's the limoni snippet. So you follow your tagline and it tells you its name when it's done.
Exactly. And to end our little presentation here, I have your favorite piece next. So if you could tell us a little bit about this one.
This is my favorite piece because when I made it, I think I had in mind that often people say, doesn't it hurt you to give away or sell your pieces? Aren't you sad to see them go? I'm like, no, it pays the rent and makes it so I can keep going. I can keep doing my art and sharing it with the world. I love that. But when I made this piece, I said, this is my piece, because this piece is made up of about 5 or 6 pieces that got the hammer. And
Mm.
it's a memory for me of how beautiful taking the scraps and bits of elements that didn't work out, sort of like some people think, well, this didn't work in my life and that didn't work in my life. But when you look at the big picture, all of those little components that you didn't think were so important made you who you are today. And you wouldn't have the inspiration you have in the moment you're in if not for all those things you weren't happy about before. So it's my bowl. I'm never giving it away. I don't even have any more for sale because I can't make I wish I could zoom in on the picture and show you better. But it has a lot of different techniques that I like. Like it's got texture on the back side. It was fired up how many times to get texture, and then
Yeah.
and you can see the texture on the back side like
Yeah.
that.
Wow.
And that adds sparkle on the front side. And then there's reaction glass in there, and there's little nuggets and components. And I love that the edge is organic and it's not
Mhm.
perfect. It's perfect with all its imperfections. All of
That's
that.
wonderful. It's such a good sentiment.
Well, and one of the pieces in there was an angel. I was making this huge angel woman, and she blew up in my kiln. Like it cracked in half. It was
Yeah.
from the gods, if you believe in that stuff, and I do. But it was like, oh, she took me so long to make it. So there's a little piece of an angel in this.
Mhm.
Oh,
Oh,
so
that's so sweet. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for showing us your studio and teaching us about Glassworks. I want to do it myself. It seems like the perfect the perfect process for me. Having all the
so you'd have to quarantine, but you can come take a class.
wonderful. That sounds great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If you want to check out Juliana's inventory that we have at the shop at the Art Gallery of Alberta, we are open Thursday to Saturday, and we're actually open this Sunday starting September 27th. So you folks can come on by, see Juliana's work, and I believe she also has a website as well, and just started an Etsy shop.
I did just start an Etsy.
Nice.
I don't even know how to handle. I'm sorry.
Projects during COVID.
You do Google Juliana Reece at Etsy or Juliana Reece Glass. And the best place to see my work as it's coming down the pipe, if you want to see the newest stuff, it seems to be Instagram. Because I have it on my phone, and often I'll be in the studio and snap pictures as I'm going. Whereas I don't always put Facebook and the other social media things on my phone because it's just too much to keep track of. So if you really want to be in the know of what's happening next, join Instagram. It's all pictures, no rants. I love it.
And your newsletter.
Yes. If you can sign up for my newsletter at my website, and I try to keep them minimal once a month or so, unless it's show season. But it's always, here's some pretty pictures. Here's the next shows. Here's the next classes. And you can just, if there's something you're looking for, you have questions, you can always just email me. If there's a piece that I have that is on the gallery or that's on my website, or you saw it in tonight's show and it's not in the gallery, they can contact you and you can contact me and we can make arrangements whatever way we need to coordinate stuff. But just because it's not in your gallery doesn't mean it's not available for you through the gallery.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Juliana. Have a fantastic evening.
You as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Be well. Hey, thanks. Bye.
Bye.